Good day, everyone. We are the FRAJOS. The pandemic has brought us many challenges in our daily lives. It changed the way we live and the way we build. We explored these changes and came up with our study called Impacts of COVID-19 on the Construction Industry in Balanga City, Bataan. Our research consists of introduction, literature review, methodology, results and discussion, and conclusion. Chapter 1. In December 31, 2019, the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Wuhan City, China, and later spread across other countries. In March 2020, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak as a global pandemic. The Philippines has become one of the infected countries, and this has led to the government mandating a total lockdown across different provinces, including Bataan. Due to this, different business sectors and industries were affected, especially the construction industry, which relies mostly on on-site work. With the emergence of the pandemic, the industry had seen interruption of operations, suspension of projects and developments, laying off of workers, and reduced construction demand. To discuss the objectives, we have here Mr. Rodel Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Christian Kenneth Grajo. The general objective of the study to assess the impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the construction industry in Balanga City, Bataan. Specifically, to determine the status of the construction industry during the COVID-19 pandemic based on project status, construction supply and materials, workforce or manpower, and workplace safety. Secondly, to identify the factor affecting the performance in a construction project. Lastly, to distinguish the most impacted factors in a construction project due to COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, we plan that the findings of this study will give insufficient information about the impact of COVID-19 on the construction industry in Balanga City, Bataan. In addition to that, this study will help the future construction company to be prepared for the sudden occurrence of the pandemic. For the literature review, let's hear from Mr. Grajo.
Thank you, Mr. Rodel Santos. Related literature. The first one deals with the assessment of the survivability of the construction industry in the case of a pandemic. The next one focuses on the delays caused by the pandemic. And the third one focuses on informing the industry members of the changes made to adjust with the pandemic. Research gap. Our study focuses with more specified objectives, while the related literature showed only one objective, thus our study having new developments. For the methodology, let's hear it from Ferdinand Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Grajo. To determine the impacts of COVID-19 on the construction industry in Balanga City, Bataan, online and on-site surveys were conducted to different construction companies. After conducting the surveys, the study proceeded to the collection of data. Then, the data gathered would be analyzed to determine the status of construction industry and to achieve other objectives. The design parameters that was considered in the study are workforce or manpower, construction supplies and materials, project status, and workplace safety. These considerations was analyzed since these are common issues in the construction industry during this global pandemic. Meanwhile, to get the required number of respondents or the sample size required for this study, the Slobin's formula was used. The formula was expressed in equation 3.1, where n is the number of respondents or the sample size, c is standard normal value for the chosen confidence interval, e is the population proportion, e is the margin of error, and capital N is the population size. The confidence level that was applied in the equation was 90%, and the interval of that in z-score was 1.645. The margin of error that was then used was 10% or 0.1. The value of population proportion was standard value of 0.5. Then the value of population was 98 construction companies in Balanga City, Bataan. With these significant values, the computed total value of respondents was 40. The descriptive mean was also used in design calculation, and it is referred as the interpretations of computed means of data. On the other hand, the scoring procedure of survey form was prepared with 4 ratings: the strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. Table 3.1 showed the interval scale and its descriptive mean. To discuss about results in discussion, let's hear it from Ms. Casaul.
Thank you, Mr. Ferdinand Francisco. After gathering all the information and data needed, here are the results of our study. Here are the list of 40 respondents came from construction companies in Balanga City, Bataan. Here, the table 4.1 shows the mean distribution of respondents on a status of construction industry towards project status. The overall weighted mean is 3.23 with a descriptive rating of agree, while 4.2 table shows that the mean distribution of respondents of the status of construction industry according to the construction supplies and materials have an overall weighted mean of 3.31 with a descriptive rating of strongly agree. Whereas table 4.3 shows the mean distribution of respondents of status of construction industry based on the workforce or manpower with an overall weighted mean of 3.24 with a descriptive rating of agree. And for the table 4.4, here are the mean distribution of respondents of the status of construction industry according to the workplace safety with an overall weighted mean of 3.33 and with a descriptive rating of strongly agree. Here are the factors affecting the performance of construction projects that the company encountered during COVID-19 pandemic. 60% of the respondents have experienced shortage of construction supplies and materials. There are 82.5% have experienced limited time and schedule of work, while 2.5% have experienced unclear regulations regarding construction business permits and insufficient transportation permits of manpower and materials. Also, there are 35% of the respondents have experienced insufficient construction permits and 67.5% have experienced delayed deliveries of construction materials, while 55% of the construction companies have experienced shortage of laborers. Here are the factors that mostly affects the construction projects that greatly influenced by COVID-19 pandemic. 52% of the respondents says that the shortage of construction supplies and materials are one of the factors that mostly affects the construction project, while 82% said that it is the limited time and the schedule of work. 22% said that it is the insufficient construction permit, while 55% said it is the delayed deliveries of construction materials, and half of the population said it is the shortage of laborers. Here are the safety adjustments of construction companies in Balanga City, Bataan. 90% have implemented new safety precautions. 67.5% have implemented mandatory use of personal protective equipment or PPE. 95% puts hand sanitizers, soap, and alcohol in their workplace, while 85% use thermal scanner to check the daily temperature of the workers. 65% have disinfected and sanitized their workplace, and 67.5% have limited the schedule of the workers. Here are the conclusions of our study. We, the researchers, concludes that COVID-19 impacted the construction industry in Balanga City, Bataan. The construction companies have experienced delayed construction projects and adjusted project schedules, which affects the progress of construction projects and developments, and find it difficult in dealing with construction permits. Due to lockdown enforced by the government, it has greatly affected the arrival of ordered materials, which led of a shortage of supplies and increase of cost materials. Also, there have been work limitations, which the construction companies led to employ new strict protocols and safety precautions in their workplace and conducted virtual meetings and seminars about COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, the most impacted factors in the construction projects that greatly influenced by the pandemic are 80% is the limitation of time and schedule of work, 55% with the delayed deliveries of construction materials, and 52% for the shortage of construction supplies and materials. I am Kristen K. Casaul, the leader of this group, and my members are Kenneth Christian Grajo, Ferdinand Francisco, Kit Cedrick Grajo, and Rodel B. Santos, with our thesis advisor, Engineer Ranier C. Santos.